So, as libraries and as public libraries, we've always been about providing access to information. And as Javed said in his introduction, that information has exploded. And you've heard the sayings around, over the last 5 years, there's been more information produced than all of, since beginning of time. Those kinds of points of data are accurate in the sense that we're seeing more and more information that's being produced. Not all of the information is accurate, not all the information is correct, not all the information comes from sources that are trustworthy. Now, again, as libraries, we've always been in the business of providing access to information in all its forms, and also the opposing viewpoints on any particular topic, because ultimately it's up to you to decide what kind of information you want to access, and access that information and make up your mind in terms of what you believe on whatever the topic is. With AI, that has shifted, and it's shifting very, very quickly. So the other thing libraries have always been in the business of is literacy. So literacy is in general literacy, reading and writing, but also media literacy, information literacy, digital literacy, financial literacy. We now talk about food literacy, so literacy in all its forms. And again, with the role that libraries play, public libraries play, is we are the only institution out there that provides unrestricted access to all of these things. And what we try to do is make sure, libraries is the great equalizer, we like to say. We want to make sure that everybody in society, everybody in community has access to the same forms of information and the same opportunities. So we do want to create those opportunities. And one of the things that we've realized is, again, this, when the internet first came out, there was this whole, you probably remember this, libraries aren't going to exist, libraries are going to be wiped out. It actually created more business for libraries than anybody would have ever imagined. At TPL, we were one of the first libraries to provide access to the internet, and then it was trying to make sure that people understood that the information they were accessing, what it was, where it was from, how to access it, how to determine whether it's relevant, true, factual information. And then what AI does on top of that is, AI is about taking data, taking information, crunching it in one way or the other, and spitting out some kind of a result. And who here has used AI or knows that they've used AI? Because, put up your hand. Okay, so pretty much all the room. You've probably had access to AI, and you probably didn't know it, because it is so prevalent in everything. If you drive a late model vehicle, it has AI incorporated in it. If you've accessed a search engine and done a search, the results you get, the first result you get in Google is AI. And again, it's back to libraries making sure that we're able to provide access to the information, the resources, and the ability to make that determination about what you're accessing, if it's factual, if it's accurate, if the source where it's coming from is giving you the actual results that you're looking for. And so more and more, and we're going to talk about this as we go, more and more libraries are going to become the place where people need to go to have access to that, because right now, AI, as it sits, is generally out there for free. And what you may or may not realize is the companies that are out there producing it are burning money like crazy. They're spending millions and billions of dollars producing the systems, building the data centers, producing all the things that they need to put this out there. And at some point, their investors are going to say, you need to make money. So where this comes into play for libraries is, once these systems are starting to be charged for, whereas you can't just go and do or you can probably still do a general ChatGPT or OpenAI search, but the actual powerful systems are going to be behind paywalls. And again, libraries are going to have to play a role in making sure that somehow, and we don't know how that's going to be because the environment is changing so much and so quickly, somehow we're able to provide that access to our communities, to our users, to the public. And so we feel that there's an important role to play. We've actually inserted ourselves, so the federal government did an AI strategy that they released finally about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. When they did the survey to ask the general public about what they wanted to see, libraries got in there all around the country and said, we need to have a play or a part, we need to play a part in this so that we're kind of the front line. So luckily in the results that came out, there's a line about libraries needing to be involved in the public education part of AI. And then we're now working on figuring out what that actually looks like as things change so quickly. So yeah, maybe I'll stop, and there's 3 more questions, and then we want you to answer questions. But Javed and I have had these conversations for a while now, so I'll try not to refer to, remember that thing I told you in the room back there? So, next question.
Thank you, Mo. I will just, again, reflecting on this question, someone who comes, and I'll be transparent. If you look me up on the web and use AI on me, you will find out very quickly that I come from more computer science and computing background, and I've probably, fortunately or unfortunately, contributed to the deluge of AI use. So I think about this problem a lot. AI transforming libraries and society. And what responsibility do we have on behalf of libraries? There is data that shows, and again, you can use AI to verify everything. And unfortunately, probably very soon, you'll be able to verify this real time as I'm speaking, which is we then have to have the responsibility to do our research and actually tell you the truth every time we open our mouth and not make up things, right? Which can be a good thing. So one of the key interesting phenomena I observed about 15 years ago, and I'm a researcher in information retrieval. My research area is in search. And if you look me up again and ask AI, you'll find out. So I used to work on developing search systems. And one of the things I observed, and I found data on, the rate and the intensity of production of scientific information has reached a state where if you are a researcher and a scholar of a specialized field, you won't be able to keep up reading all of the relevant information for that specific area you're interested in your lifetime. You will need multiple lifetimes to read all the relevant items. And that has been scientifically shown. It has been published in a paper. And how did they do that? Well, they looked at all of the scientific disciplines and they tried to rank them and find out what is the one scientific discipline which produces the most number of publications every year. Can you guess what is that scientific discipline? What is the most active discipline, do you think?
Yeah.
Medicine.
Yeah.
Biomedicine.
Sorry, I whispered it.
Yeah. Biomedicine produces the most publications every year, the largest number of research publications. And they actually then focused and honed in on biomedicine and counted for very specialized areas, not just for the whole field, for very specific areas, how many papers are published. For cell biology, they found out the number of papers published are so many and so large and so quickly they are produced, it is not humanly possible to keep up with that specific area. And in fact, they showed it for specific sub-areas under cell biology. It is not possible. They estimated how long does it take for a human to read an article and actually understand it. Think about that. Why is that important? That's important for us to know. I will come to the point. I'm sorry. You give the mic to a professor.
Get lectured.
I'm very sorry. It is a very important point because then what is expertise? If someone claims that I'm an expert in this area, have you read everything? Have you understood everything? Have you had the time to consume and really digest all of the recent research in your area? If they say yes, no. That is the truth. That has been shown. So this is one side of, you can say, is AI having influence and impact on that? You bet it's having an impact. You know what has happened to that publication rate that I noticed 15 years ago? That has become even more intense, and it's growing faster. Then we come back to the question, what impact does that have on libraries? What is the role of the library then when production is so fast, so voluminous? What should the libraries do? Screen, prioritize, match, become a team member to the medical expert. And guess what happens in medical schools that I have been affiliated with? Librarians play a role of becoming a team member. They work very closely with researchers. Seriously, at least in the US, the health science librarians often are co-authors in publications because they're beloved and they're appreciated. They become members of the research team. You have to develop capacity to keep up. More humans is better than a single human, right? So there are many roles, and I think it is, if you just focus on the institution as a library, you would miss the mark. For me, it's the people who inhabit these institutions are much more important to me. I think we need to focus in on this expertise of intermediation, expertise of adding expert capacity to scholarship, to learning. I hope to do that here as a dean. So, next question. What role should governments and libraries play in building trustworthy and responsible AI? Now, Moe mentioned that Canadian plan, AI plan. And rightfully, I think Moe is very proud that the community got together and wanted to make sure, the community of librarians and information specialists wanted to make sure that Canada's strategy for AI, the first one, by the way, ever produced in Canada. Canada now has a minister of AI. I don't know if you know that. So, what should government and libraries do in ensuring the AI is trustworthy and responsible? No.
Okay, thank you for that question too, and so many things to talk about. I'd love to go back and touch on, but I'll try to weave in what you just talked about from a practical perspective and an upcoming question around the amount of data that's out there. But from a trust perspective, we've seen repeatedly that libraries, especially public libraries, are one of the most trusted institutions in a community. So there's sometimes another community service comes first. Does anybody know what that might be? Fire, exactly. So interestingly, fire sometimes has a higher trust rating than libraries, but generally libraries have the highest trust rating, and we want to keep that. We want to make sure that we're recognized as a trusted institution. And again, with the topic of AI, we want to make sure that we're providing the community with access to the information they need, as I keep saying, to make their own decisions, and not to push one thing or the other. I mean, part of it is going to be AI education, AI literacy. The other part of it is making sure that the community has an opportunity to, or an individual living in the community has an opportunity to kind of thrive in this changing society. So one of the things we're doing at TPL, we got $3 million from Google, and we're not tied to Google in any way of using their products, but Google wanted to give us $3 million so we can undertake an AI upskilling initiative. So we now have an AI upskilling initiative at TPL where we're trying to provide programs, access to services, education around what do you need to do as an individual living in this society where AI is so prevalent, and how are you going to, what do you need to change in your life to, so you might be in one of those industries that they keep saying are going to be, extinct because AI is replacing it. So what role do we have as libraries? We've always been around job skills, reskilling, upskilling. in the world of AI, we're going to have to do that in a much faster, bigger way, and hence needing some additional funds to do that. So we've got that ability to do that. We're doing it. We want others to follow suit. We want there to be an understanding that libraries play an important role in this. We'll partner with the government to make sure that, because again, you know, government, unfortunately, at this point, whether here in the US or anywhere, isn't as trusted as it should be, as it could be. We are, and we want to make sure that we use that opportunity to build trust around access to AI, access to the resources that the community needs, and the upskilling training, and anything that you need in terms of being able to partake in society as it's shifting, as it's changing under our feet as we speak. So it's important for libraries, as what we've done for years, and many, many years, as Javed was saying, libraries have been around for centuries and thousands of years. We want to make sure we maintain that role and responsibility and the trustworthiness of what we do, so that the community can come to us and understand what it means to live in a society with AI, what it means to need to do some upskilling or retraining, or what other industries exist that you can shift into. So you know, we've talked about how this whole issue of, you know, there's going to be fewer jobs and people are losing their jobs. Well, there's this other flip side of it as well. If people don't have jobs, how are these AI companies going to make money? So we do have to, they have to sell to somebody, and also for society, you know, living in a capitalist society, people need to spend money to keep things going. So it's not all doom and gloom, and I'm a bit of an optimist, but not to the point where I'm not recognizing the issues or the signs that are out there. And we just need to make sure that we're being realistic about this. It is moving incredibly quickly, and it's, again, we have to try to keep up, and with our own staff as well. So as Javed said, it's our staff who are going to be doing this. And so we also have, well, we created our own AI policy back in January 2025. Already a lot of what we put in there is not relevant anymore because it's changed so quickly. Like, one of the things we put into that policy was, you're only, as staff, you're only going to be able to use things that we've approved and reviewed, and, you know, we make sure that it's accurate and does the things we want it to do, and it comes from a reputable source or a company. We also don't want our information to be put out there because we have all kinds of information, including customer information. We don't want to put that out into the AI world, so that information is not within our, it's for us to keep, because there's privacy issues and other things. But interestingly, and I was saying this to Javed, Adobe is one of the tools that we use, and we provide to staff on the image of the computers that staff use. Adobe's there because you need Adobe. It's a tool that you need to read PDFs. Without anything that we've done, just Adobe upgrading, there's now full-on AI embedded into Adobe. And you can, I was saying, so this idea of being more, using your time more efficiently and more effectively, and it's not just for our staff, but it's for the general public. Adobe now has a little button you can press, and it will turn the article that you're looking at, or whatever that you're looking at, into a podcast, so you can listen to it in 10 minutes as opposed to reading, you know, a 20-minute article. And again, making sure that everyone that's out there, and it goes back to the idea that Javed was talking about, where there is so much information out there, and depending on what tools you're using, so back to, again, making sure that the community and the individuals and people who are living in the people that we're serving on a day-to-day basis, living in the neighborhoods that we provide service to, understand that when you do a search, depending on what that search is, what information or what data that information, where that information is coming from, it could either be somebody's blog or 3 or 4 people who are putting their own ideas out there, or it could be this wealth of medical information that exists to the point where, as a human being, you can't actually access it, but the AI can process that data in a way that it'll actually spit out something that is accurate and trustworthy because it's based on peer-reviewed, actual journals that exist in a world where accuracy and making sure that you're putting real information out there as opposed to somebody's perceptions or thoughts or ideas that aren't based on research and all the things that, you know, the data that exists in those journals relies on. And so again, making sure that people understand that that data, that information that sits out there, not all of it is accurate. There is a whole bunch of it that is accurate, but if you're not pointing to that data, you're not going to have the accuracy that you need. And the difference between doing a Google search now to say, I've got these 4 ailments, going back to the medical data, and Google coming back and immediately telling you it's cancer, because that's usually what it does, versus if you're pointing to these journals, and if there's been research or something done on some minor thing that's happened in a world where you don't know anything about, and the doctor you're going to doesn't know anything about, but the fact that you've been able to search that through crunching the data with AI, and it's able to incorporate that result and give you information that you wouldn't normally have access to. Like, that's the difference between just kind of doing a general search or having access to data systems or AI systems that are based on information that you can trust and rely on. And again, our role is to make sure that we continue to provide access to that data and to that information. And one of the things, again, we've always done is provide access to research databases. So you can go to our website and search all the research databases that are peer-reviewed journals and information that is actually based on research, as opposed to searching Google and finding someone's blog who thinks they're the expert on whatever the topic may be. So the trust is important. We need to maintain that trust, and the trust is going to continue to exist because we're able to provide people with access and resources that they can continue to thrive in this changing world that we're living in. And it is changing incredibly quickly, so.
Thank you, Mo. So just to add a couple of points on that, this role in terms of ensuring responsible AI and trustworthy AI. So if you think about it, the current tools and systems that we have been using, increasingly are owned or managed by a very small number of companies, as you know. And you can count them in one hand now, pretty much. And you know them, right? And where are they based in? In that small country down south. Really? One country has all of those important information, not just for you to be able to maintain your life and your future, your career, but also you are dependent so much that you continuously share all your interests, your aspirations, your dreams, your problems, intimate information with those handful of companies. So at one level, the question is relatively simple. If there are governments outside that small country's government, every government has a significant responsibility to ensure their citizenry have access to trustful, open, democratically managed information systems, right? This is the concept of sovereign AI that you may have heard some leaders talk about. And I think this is very important, increasingly important, and it is coming because the governments are realizing power is hyper aggregated into hands of a small number of corporations, and they happen to be located in a place where what other proofs do you want in terms of this place scaring the heck out of you? Right? It's hard for me to say that because I love my country. I love my adopted country. You know? But overall, there needs to be a flattening of who owns these kinds of resources, technologies that help us. And we are now dependent in an information age to be able to maintain even our basic life, like access to banks, access to interest rates, access to medical care. You have to go through these systems, right? So it is really very, very important that we begin to exercise our power as citizens of democratic countries and insist that our government protect us, you know. and it is no longer acceptable, that one of the key currencies, life sources even of today, of this information age, is who manages the information. How much does it cost? Who has access to it? Can we trust it? We know AI makes massive, not just small mistakes, massive, big mistakes, even today. And Moe and I were talking about it. The problem is when they make mistakes, they don't say, I made a mistake. Have you ever seen an AI say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? The opposite. They confidently give you the wrong answer. We have proofs of that, right? Which is worse. So yes, AIs have to be responsible. AIs have to be transparent. AIs have to give us trust. And they have to be, I think, regulated. Even in the US, they started regulating, right? Have you noticed? They have stopped access to certain types of AI recently. They have. Because of national security, apparently. But many other services and many other organizations are dependent on that AI. So how does that work? The government can just one day announce, sorry, you can't access Google anymore. It's too complicated to explain, but you won't be able to use it from tomorrow. Sorry. We're going to nationalize it. Well, it may happen. It's already happening, actually. So these are very important questions for us to think through, and I think as an information field, and those of us who care about providing trustful, responsible information all the time, these are important issues for us to address. So I'll move on to the next question. What does data quality, why does data quality matter, and how can people evaluate AI-generated information? Mo, if you have some points to share on that.
Whatever. I mean, so data quality has always mattered. And again, as libraries, we collected and curated and pulled together, whether it was collections of books or access to databases. And in some ways with AI, we've lost a little control over that because, as we're saying, depending on whose AI system it is and what information it's pointing to, it could be inaccurate. It could be wrong, and it could very confidently tell you that, this is the answer to the question you're asking. And so again, AI literacy, just as I mentioned earlier, but whether it's digital literacy, it's still digital literacy, but it's now AI literacy in the sense that there's digital literacy around the things that previously existed to the explosion of AI, but AI is shifted in terms of how we look at that information, the access to that information, and the accuracy of that information. So it's back to this, what I said earlier, where you could do a search and Google can come up and tell you very confidently based on these 3 resources that this is the answer to your question. And just as we've done in libraries for many, many years, it's find multiple resources, cross-reference the resources to make sure that you're landing on a piece of truth that is repeated in multiple varied sources that are telling you that, as opposed to one source that could be biased, inherently biased, it could be intentionally biased, it could be just inaccurately biased because it's pointing to the wrong bit of information or data. So libraries play a huge role and have always played a huge role, and that's back to what I said at the beginning. We want to provide access to information in all its forms. We've always done that. Multiple viewpoints, multiple points of view through whatever the topic is. An individual item may be biased, but our collections as a whole, because we've collected on all the viewpoints, is going to give you all the different viewpoints, and eventually when you go through it, you'll be able to make your own determination of what you want to believe based on the information you've accessed. With AI, it's really easy to do that search and believe the first thing you see. And Javed, I mean, I'll give the example, but as Javed said, we've had many conversations. One of my loves is motorcycles. So one of my motorcycles, the battery died. And so I thought, I'm just gonna do a quick Google search, tell me what battery I need for this motorcycle. First result came back very confidently based on, 3 sources, this is the battery you need. And I thought, yeah, it doesn't sound right. And I actually did more searching, and finally, guess what? I just pulled out the owner's manual, and it told me the battery. And it was wrong, but Google was telling me it was wrong. So it's back to what's the source of truth, and what is the AI system pointing to? And then, to Javed's point, who controls and who owns that data? And then what do they want to include in that data? As I said, the bias can be built into the data that it provides access to. There was an article a while back that compared the results from an OpenAI query versus DeepSeek, which is the Chinese produced AI system, and the results were totally different. What the AI system from China, of course, had the propaganda that the government in that country wants you to believe, whereas the information in the OpenAI search was totally different. Whichever one was more accurate or not, and I'm not judging, but all I'm saying is you can search 4 different AI systems and get 4 different results, because it's the data that's within that is being accessed that's giving you the results. And the data could be vastly different. It could be what data they have access to. And to Javed's point, information and data is being monetized at a pace where that's the most important currency right now. So the whole idea of AI, it's not the AI tool, it's the data that's behind it that's worth money. That's what they're making money on. And so again, making sure that the information that's being put out there is being put out there by a trustworthy source that is pointing to all the different, so going back to the medical example, you could point to a small subset, or you could point to everything that has existed over time. Now, at some point, there is things that have been, over time, been proven, to be wrong. So if you have more of that and less of the correct, you're gonna get the wrong information. So it really comes down to that information, and libraries still play a role, and have always had a role in making sure that we're providing access to accurate information for whoever the end user is to, again, determine and make up their mind in terms of what's true for them. And making sure that our collections continue, so whether it's the collections that are sitting on the shelf, we weed on a regular basis because information gets dated, and the travel books, for example, or even medical books. So we're weeding on a regular basis. If AI doesn't weed and it's pointing to dated information, you're going to get inaccurate results. So, yeah, sorry, I don't know if I answered that question. I feel like I'm ranting now.
No, thank you. No, I think, there is a short abbreviation. Sometimes they use the term GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And it is actually true in that pretty much all significant AI that you see today that provide some type of a value are, retroactive, meaning they are trained on existing knowledge. And so the quality of that existing knowledge, as well as how the training was done, how carefully it was done, how rigorously it was done, determine the output. It's not really complicated from that perspective. But it also points to some hope for humanity, which I think we're going to get to in the next question, hopefully. Meaning, where does that knowledge come from? If AI is so great, can it cure cancer? What are we waiting for? What is the cure for cancer now? It's not going to come anytime soon, folks, I can tell you that. Why? Because it only can come from human knowledge. The total sum of knowledge that we have has been exhausted. This is one of the key problems of humanity that many, many great brains have been attempting to solve for a long time. Not one individual, many people. So the retroactive nature of AI is going to be a limitation, but also an advantage for human brains for a long time to come. Good knowledge, good AI. But good knowledge comes from human brains. Good training, good AI. Good training comes from human brains. You can see, you can ask AI, show me examples of training AI, and you'll see how AI is trained. You'll see some ridiculous examples today, like people wearing mobile phones on their heads while they're going about doing their everyday tasks. People are being paid to do that. So the AI can video every task an individual is doing, and it can take that video and learn from it. This way should always remind you that AI really is starting from first principles, basic knowledge. It's still at early days in terms of where it is. Going to the next question, how can libraries help address the AI divide and ensure equitable access? And I'll ask my friend Moe to give some thoughts to this.
So, I mean, in one word, access. It really is about access. Like, it is about having a place to go where, and as we've said, you could right now access, all the 5, 6, whatever number of AI tools that are out there for free. Eventually it won't be free. And so libraries are gonna have to provide that access like we've done to the internet. So, believe it or not, you probably all have access to the internet, but there's still a subset of people living in Toronto where their access to the internet is coming to the library, using our Wi-Fi, jumping on our computers. And so, it's gonna be the same with AI. And I actually feel like that divide is gonna widen pretty quickly because, I won't get into the numbers, but I'll give you the example that, Javed and I were talking about earlier, and I promised I wouldn't say that, but just to give you the example, a certain company, vendor, who's out there providing, access to office tools, their AI tool costs almost as much as all the office tools together per license per staff member. So it's per month as well. So, and we were recently approached and said, we can give this to you at a discounted rate. Well, the full rate is a ridiculous amount. And so we have to look at how do we as a library system fund access to AI for the community and for our staff, frankly. And again, keep in mind, this is one tool. There's 5 or 6 big ones out there. And then once and part of it too is, we didn't get into this conversation around, if we build an AI tool that we use in-house, not build ourselves, but use, let's say, Copilot, and it is relying on the data that it's a closed system, so language, large language model, closed system within our own institution. If we decide we don't want to use Copilot, how do we move or migrate that data to OpenAI, let's say? So there are things that are coming that we haven't contemplated, that we haven't thought about. That's for ourselves as the internal business, and then how do we do that for the public? So can we as a library, once all of the different vendors out there start charging for access, afford to provide access to OpenAI and whatever Elon Musk's is, Grok, ChatGPT, Copilot, because they're all the results that they produce are all going to be different because they're all pointing to their own large language models. There maybe isn't I don't know enough, and maybe Javed can speak to this too, but I don't think there's, all of those models are hoarding their own data and their own information and feeding their data or their AI tools the information, as Javed was saying. It's either based on information they're collecting from the information you put out there, the things that people are doing, it's mining fiction and nonfiction materials. Authors are freaking out right now because the knowledge that they've put out there, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's getting fed into these AI tools. But each AI tool has a different system of data, or a database of information, and so the results are gonna look different. So then as libraries, we gotta figure out how we provide access to, and maybe in the end, it becomes like everything else, there's only gonna be one or two tools, because that's what happens, they eat each other up, and eventually there's only, a monopoly. We'll see what happens with AI. But what it's gonna come down to is libraries needing to make sure that the community, that our users, that society has access to these tools, because not everybody's gonna be able to pay an extra, whether it's, actually, I don't know if for ChatGPT, for example, $50 a month. So when you think about, if you're buying that $50 a month on top of everything else, maybe you can afford it in your budget, but someone who can't even afford access to the internet can't then afford another $50 a month. And so libraries have always been, as I say, the great equalizer. We provide access to services, to technology that not everybody can have access to, but that's what we do. And we gotta figure out what that looks like in terms of how we fund those models so that we can provide access to the community. So more to come on that. We're still trying to figure it out even for our own staff, but also that, then what do we do in terms of access for the public? Once they start monetizing it, and they will, it's coming, I will put money on it that within the next 6 months to 12 months, you're gonna start to see systems that are no longer as useful as they were in the free version, and then you're gonna have to pay the extra uplift to access the tool that is gonna actually be helpful. Because the other tools aren't gonna be as helpful, because obviously they wanna push you into some kind of a payment system so they can start making money. And it is, for them, it is about, right now they've worked through, as I said, a ton of money, like billions of dollars, and their investors wanna start seeing, a return on the investment. So you are gonna start seeing charges, and then the libraries are gonna have to figure out how we can provide that access. And then which tools do we provide access to, so.
Thank you, Mo. I think in the remaining time we have, we can take some questions from the audience, please. There's a question there. If you don't mind standing up so we can all hear you, don't need a mic
You
here.
mentioned AI make mistakes. From my experience, my working experience, they not only make mistakes, they make up things.
Yeah.
A lot of times they
They do.
give the citation doesn't exist.
Yes. And they present it to you very, very confidently.
Yeah.
Yeah, as if, that is the truth.
So
right?
in the
Yeah.
school setting, I'm thinking like whose responsibility to verify if it's true, like student,
Exactly.
professor, or library person.
Exactly, exactly. This is very concerning, so. Any other comments or reflections? Yes.
Well, just to give an example, I find Wikipedia is a great source of information. Is it somehow going to be overtaken by AI, or will we continue to be able to?
Well, I'm willing to bet that information is already being mined. So that's a free source of information that's out there that I put money down on every single one of those AI tools is already pointing to it. In terms of how that information is built, I can't speak for Wikipedia, but the whole idea of Wikipedia was hopefully experts and crowdsourcing to make sure that the information is accurate. So if someone puts something that's inaccurate, someone else can go and say, this is not accurate, here's the actual source for that piece of information that's accurate. Whether Wikipedia survives or not, it'll be interesting to see. But that's the whole idea, that Wikipedia was the answer to doing internet searches and getting inaccurate information. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but already that information I'm willing to bet is being mined for sources of results. So if that information continues to be accurate, hopefully the results are accurate, but as we know, it's not. So.
Thank you.
I guess what I'm getting at is, can we circumvent AI and
By,
go directly to Wikipedia?
I think to Javed's point, there's so much information now that Wikipedia is not going to be not all of it is going to be able to be fed through Wikipedia. But again, I don't know if you've got thoughts on that.
Well, I think some of these vendors are actually signing up authors, signing up publishers, so that they have access to published and reviewed materials as well.
And exclusive
And
access.
exclusive access to those materials. So over time, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, who owns that data?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, One
Oh,
final question, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that I've kind of been wondering, it was mentioned that that more data is being produced than any person can conceivably consume. Now, personally, I regard the initial trawling of the internet done by these models to be the greatest theft ever perpetrated in human history, just because of the total value of the intellectual property. So going forward, how do you think we can make sure that the people who are actually creating all this intellectual property are still benefiting from it, instead of ending up in a world where all of this stuff would be being created to be mined, except nobody's benefiting from it anymore because the AI takes all the benefit?
I think, the benefit comes mainly through the recognition you receive from publications, and it really is that initial recognition of you being able to claim that I was the first one that produced the knowledge, and you can, if you are an academic, you can gain from it, or if you are in industry, you can gain from that by being the inventor. But I think you're right. The lines will get fuzzier and fuzzier in terms of who can leverage that information most powerfully will begin to dominate, not just the producer, but the ones that actually end up leveraging the information, the user and the consumer. And that balance is always tricky, right? You can't actually remove the consumer and the user too far away, but you also need to make sure that the producer get their benefit that they well deserve, right? And this is what copyright and intellectual property laws are supposed to balance.
It's an interesting thought too. So as Javed was talking, I was thinking about the music industry as an example to what you're saying. So I remember when I was first in library school, and we got access to email and to Netscape and Mosaic, and the Rolling Stones put their Steel Wheels, I think, album, and I sat there, waited for 20 minutes for one song to be downloaded, and then Napster came out, and then look at the music industry now, where, to your point, to a certain extent, there's artists that are selling their entire catalog because they want to make that instant money and walk away from it. But it'll be, to David's point again, you have to still have producers and consumers. And I don't know if to have new content, like it's gonna, there's this idea that, AI can author a book. Well, can it to the point that humans can? And I don't know, I'm not sure. It still kind of remains to be seen. It can write speeches, it can write, respond to your email, it can pull together a response to a question based on existing data, but can it actually come up with something unique and different from what's out there? And there's also this thing that, there is no unique knowledge. It's always being regurgitated based on existing knowledge, and maybe we've hit our point of it's the same thing being put out there in a different way. I'm also, back to me being a bit of an optimist, I'm also thinking, back to this idea of cancer, and maybe we've come as humans, we've come this close to figuring it out. And in all the research papers that are out there and all the studies that have been done, because we don't have the ability to mine that, maybe, just maybe, the data that's out there and AI mining it can come up with something. Because I do think there's benefits to this, there's definitely pitfalls to this, but as a society, I hope we kind of move towards the benefit side of this, and that we start solving some of the world's problems, because that's what we do as human, society. You wouldn't say that now with everything that's happening in the world, but I'm hoping the pendulum swings in the other direction. So I do think, it's something to be aware of. There's definitely really positive things that will come out of this, but there's also the dark side of this that, has potential to very quickly go in the other direction.
Well, with that note, unfortunately,
We were told this the
close.
last question, yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much for your attention and presence today.